Yeah, well, I think from the climate standpoint, the very clear #1 objective should be coal.
Yeah.
That, because once you burn it and put the CO2 in the atmosphere, you can't get it back. And it's clear that oil and gas, we're going to use the readily available oil and gas is going to be used, and that's enough to get us into the dangerous zone of amount of atmospheric CO2. But it's not so far that you can't get back to a safe zone by means of sensible actions in agricultural and forestry practices. But there's so much CO2 in coal that there's no practical way to solve the problem if you burn all of the coal. And because coal has all these other disadvantages with air pollution and mercury emissions, it is the logical target which we should eliminate. Then the problem becomes solvable. It's 80% of the solution. So I really think that should be the focus. If we would have a moratorium on new coal-fired power plants and then phase out the existing ones over the next 20 years, then you can solve the problem. Otherwise, it just looks like it's unsolvable problem.
Like in Denmark, we say we have these very efficient coal-fired power plants.
Yeah, see, that's the mistake, and that's what the German environmental minister is trying to tell me. But that doesn't help. If you burn it a little more efficiently or more slowly, because it stays in the atmosphere more than 1,000 years, it doesn't help to slow it down, your emissions. You've got to actually not emit it, because it will delay. And another problem with cap and trade is that you can't make all the decisions and all the compromises that it inevitably would entail in a short period of time. It takes, people may agree to something in principle, but then to actually ratify it would be like the Kyoto Protocol, where you spend a decade arguing about it, and then you make some additional compromises, and so it turns out to be ineffectual. The way that you could get an effective international accord would be agreeing that there has to be a price on carbon emission. They wouldn't even have to set that price to start with, but set up a system such that the countries that agree apply a comparable internal carbon tax, and they collect that revenue, and I think in order for that tax to be high enough to change the way society designs its energy systems is to have the money returned to the taxpayer rather than going to the government. You just, on a monthly basis, you just return it to the taxpayers on a per capita basis. And that way, the public would be willing to accept a substantial carbon price. And there are, if you ask economists, almost all of them agree that the effective way to deal with the problem would be a carbon price, a carbon tax. So I think there's still hope for that, but it's going to be a tough sell. What often happens is they will say, yes, that's a better approach, but I don't think it's politically viable. Well, I think we have to change people's perception of what is viable, because we don't have the time to go through another 10 or 12 years with a policy which is going to be ineffectual.
I think that's thank you for your time.